What did you think of Justin Fields' performance against the Arizona Cardinals?
So I watched it this morning. I'm not gonna lie. I watched that game. I watched the Broncos game, and I'm sitting there and I fire off a tweet that I thought Justin played pretty well. That I thought was going to be the least controversial take I had today. And I get back on Twitter, and it's apparently there's a big fight going on. I thought he was create. I thought he created a lot of plays. I'm not going to sit here and be like, man, I thought we played on time from the pocket a bunch, but I'm not really sure the scheme and what we were getting really allowed us to. I thought he created well. I think the one interception you look at, and you go, man, I would have loved to see him go on time to the post to DJ Moore. But I get what he's hanging on, right? You've got your back out of the backfield on that little, corner route. It's really probably a choice route if we're being honest, but he ends up running the corner. At first, the DB's down playing the flat, and he peels off and makes a pick. You hate to see red zone turnovers, but I thought he was creative outside the pocket. I thought Komet did a great job in scramble drill. And then it's funny because Packers fans, you see them, right? And they'll screenshot Fields' passing stats next to Love as if you really need to evaluate Fields on just what he does through the air. Like, how many plays did he go extend and then run for 20? And then there's the one that it felt like was like a 40 or 50-yard game that gets called back. So to me, I thought he played well. It doesn't seem like that the fan base is still divided on him, which makes total sense. I think the harder decision is what's going to happen, what they're going to decide to do come draft time. But I do think the kid played well against the Cardinals.
Do you when you're calling plays in a gotta have it third and short, fourth and short situation, is there a play that you want to know, look, this pretty much always works. We're going to run this, and I don't care if the other team knows that we're going to run it because our execution is going to be top notch. When I watch the Bears, Tim, I find myself being frustrated with the idea that they either don't have or don't call a play that they feel like is going to work in those short yardage situations. And some of the statistics on Fields not running the ball in fourth and short lately are frustrating to me.
Yeah, I think the Bears, when you watch them on some of these short yard situations, it seems like they get a little carried away on the whiteboard on Monday mornings, right? They all get together and it's like, man, what if we'll start here, motion Justin out, and then we'll snap it to him and he'll try to run, right? Versus, hey, we've got a really great player on the edge. Like, to me, I just think Komet's on the stick route and Fields is in read zone, to where if we give it to our running back, we're automatically +1 because we're reading a guy, right? So when I say +1, I mean we automatically now will be 5-on-5 or 6-on-6 blocking because we've made one guy stay home with the quarterback, right? So if Fields gives it to the back, boom, we're already +1. If that guy bites down, then we have who we all think is probably one of our best offensive players. He has the ball in his hand running. And then worst case scenario, you get that nickel off the edge, or you get that free safety who's rolled up or strong safety rolled up off the edge. And then I think you fire to Komet. I think you just give him a three-way option. And I would almost run that every short yard situation because I just think it's so dynamic with Justin back there. You could also talk me into, hey, we're just going to run power or we're just going to get downhill, and I'd buy that too. But there is times where you just watch them and it just feels like they get carried away with the whiteboard and drawing up something super exotic, trying to trick somebody versus, hey, we're just going to line up and we're going to play really sound football and convert this.
I was thinking the same thing watching the Chiefs and watching an unquestionably great quarterback, maybe one of the best quarterbacks of all time, get in some situations that were in between or overly ornate or the word that kept popping in my head was overcooked. That just so many of their situational plays in that game just seemed overcooked when they didn't need to be.
Yeah, I think the NFL tends to do that, right? It's very rarely do you see teams where they recycle plays or they recycle a good call from earlier in the game, which it frustrates me because I don't think defenses are that good. I think players are that good at recognition, and I think there's a handful throughout the league who will recognize a play if they see it twice. But broadly speaking, I don't think defenses are that good, and I say that because I don't think everyone is studying every detail like a quarterback or a coach is doing. We just assume that everyone's doing it. And it's not the truth. I think you could reload more often than not. Miami is a really good example of a team that reloads plays and doesn't care. Now there's, somebody yelling right now saying, well, it's because they're so fast, which sure, you could say, hey, they have great players. But when you look at a lot of these top end NFL teams, they have great players, right? It's not like we're sitting there like, man, the Niners don't have any weapons. Like, that's not what people were saying last night, right? It's, hey, they didn't play a good football game. And the Ravens, I think, come out and hit you in the mouth. And I felt like that ever since, Ray Lewis was there. It felt like they've always had that DNA of, we're going to come and we're going to be really physical and you're going to have to react to it. And I do think there's a lot of teams right now in the NFL who make it more complex than it has to be on offense. And I do think we sometimes get carried away situationally or in short yardage situations. And we forget that, hey, if we just execute, we're going to be good against any defense.
I know this is a little off script. We talk a lot about X's and O's, and I know that a lot of our conversations, Tim, go down to the film and what we see and who's where. But I also want to tap into your expertise coaching high-level guys, not necessarily eighth graders, high school kids. I'm talking about collegiate/pro potential guys or actual pros. When it comes to the psychological work of what we were talking about with Justin Fields and getting the sense from him of maybe a little bit of awareness of his professional situation, a little bit of fatalism, a little bit of melancholy, and how he's talking about, feeling about where his feet are, appreciating the moment and knowing, regardless of what my football decision is right here, it's okay to know sort of a larger context. I don't know how much you do that as a coach, but I'm just interested for the really high-level guys, what sort of significance you put on that overall psychological awareness of moment and situation.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, it's probably why you get paid, right? I think the off-season, they pay you to get them better, right? 1% better. And then in-season, they pay you to help keep them on track and focused on the objective while simultaneously understanding, like, hey, there is a lot of moving parts here. If you were Fields' quarterback coach in the building, to me, it's a really easy motivator. Like, hey, dude, I clearly believe in you, right? Because I've been coaching you this whole season, but let's figure out ways that you can play your ass off and keep this job, right? That would have been my message for the last six weeks. And I think depending on how you build relationships, that can go over really well. I do think the NFL is it's a tricky dynamic within building coaches. And I say that because you almost hesitate. Some of these coaches almost hesitate to build great relationships because you have to be able to make really hard decisions. Think about just the preseason process, right? If you get close to these people, you're firing half of them at the end of it, right? It's not it's not a traditional job. Most jobs, we hire people and you're hoping it works out, right? You're not like, hey, we hired all these guys and we're only going to keep half, right? It's untraditional from that standpoint. Now, some of your stars like Justin, right? You probably could obviously build a better relationship because he's going to be there at the end of training camp. But it is such an interesting situation. There's, every quarterback has his in-building guy, right? His actual quarterback coach that everybody knows on the roster. And I think his job really is more motivator than anything, and then scheme. But they also have their out-of-building coach, and their out-of-building coach probably is the one who's giving them more of the, hey, man, you're going to have options regardless of the end of the season, but we need you to finish strong. And I think Justin is. I think when you turn on the tape for Justin, I don't think it's a question of will he be a starting quarterback next year in the NFL. I think the question is where. And I think if you're coaching him, I do think there's a lot of different ways that you could kind of motivate him and also encourage him to obviously finish the season out strong, because it's going to play a huge role in whether or not he stays there, but also what teams are willing to give up to go get him.
That's interesting. Dan and I often talk about game flow as a play caller. What's your philosophy on collection of plays versus putting together a script and then maybe even having to go off that script as the game is going on?
Yeah, I love scripting early, but I'm more of like a formational script, right? Hey, how are they going to react to this? How are they going to react to bunch? How are they going to react to our motion across? We're going 3-by-1 to 2-by-2. Do they have any auto checks? That's really what I'd love to see in that first part. And then to me, I'm honestly more of a touch guy. Like, hey, how can I get these guys touches? Like, to me, I'm like, where's my Mooney shot, right? In the first 15. I'm taking a shot to Mooney. Hey, where's my DJ Moore isolation? Where's my DJ Moore double move? Where's my Komet body up over the middle? How am I going to get Fields a couple of touches on the perimeter? Like, to me, I'd be all about how are we going to generate touches to our best players? Because I feel like when you really hear some of the great quarterbacks talk, it was never really about like, hey, this scheme or that scheme. It was, listen to Aaron Rodgers when he goes, and he talks about Devontae Adams, and it was like, hey, how am I going to make sure I get him involved early? And I think you've got to be cognizant of that as a playmaker or a play caller is let's get everybody who we need in this game a touch early. And then let's have these things organized to where, yeah, sure, I've got my third down scheme calls, but I've got my first and second down calls where I know who I'm going to really try to generate a touch for here, which to me is super important with making sure we keep everybody in the game, right? Because some of these games you can feel where it gets carried away and then all of a sudden we fire one to Mooney late and it's like it feels like Mooney was just like not even running full speed, right? And
Devontae Adams yesterday. There was a play on the goal line where they tried to run a little like a rub screen, and Devontae Adams, he did like the picket. He didn't even try to block.
And it feels like sometimes, we all want to sit there and say like, hey, you should do your job 100% no matter what, right? Like that's obviously the default coaching point. But I do think as a play caller, you're also responsible for getting everyone into the game.
You know what you sound like? You know what you sound a lot, and you may not even hear it.
A basketball
coach? You sound like a basketball coach. No, it really is true. Will Perdue was telling us last week, and he was talking about how guys who sort of get their arousal level going. It's like, all right, here I am. I'm important. I'm meaningful. You got my attention. And like you say, even though they're pro athletes at the highest level, that you're going to get a guy who's going to run back, maybe play a little bit harder defense. And that's just human nature.
Well, I think the thing is you got to know, too, what gets them going, right? Because like a guy like Mooney, I don't even think it's a catch. I think it's a shot attempt, right? So I don't think Mooney's like, man, because I think some of these guys where they're home run hitters, they know there's games where you're going 0 for, but then there's also games where you're going 3 for 130, right? So those guys, it's like, hey, let's get him a shot. DJ Moore, it's like, let's get him a hitch backside, get him a catch, a little run after catch, and he's going to be fine. Get Komet something where he gets to push a linebacker a little bit, body him up, and then get Justin a little bit of contact. Not even contact, but get him out there to where he can, go run, make a play, get down, protect himself, or he gets, barely nicked. I think there's a lot of things that when you watch these guys over a season, you can kind of start to pick up, okay, hey, here's what's going to keep him locked in a game. And it's what you have to do. That's why you get paid as a coach, is to motivate them and then simultaneously make sure that when the fourth quarter comes around and now, guess what? They're giving us all out 0 and I need Mooney to run his ass off and get open on this, slot takeoff. He's going to do it. And I do think sometimes the Bears, it doesn't always feel like we really manufacture touches for some of these guys.
Have you watched a lot of tape this year of Baker Mayfield?
Oh, yeah, Tampa. They're making a little run. But I think
why's he been better?
I think Baker's one of those guys that there's nothing scheme or physical. I think Baker is very much moment to moment. I've thought this since he was in college, and I don't think it's like a negative on a quarterback. I really don't think you could genuinely sit there and say, man, Baker Mayfield XYZ is better for him. What I do think you can say is I think that building believes in him, and a guy like Baker who's going to go out there and make a lot of throws where you sit there on tape and you go, no, okay, right? I think he makes a lot of those throws, and when you have a building that believes in you, that's going to make a guy like him better. Baker, I do think the reason he has not stuck around a franchise and been successful the whole time is because I just think it's very moment to moment. I don't feel like it's something where it's like I could sit there and say I confidently believe it's sustainable, but I do think it's really fun to watch when it's working.
I think he's made himself some money, though.
There's no doubt. But don't forget Matt Flynn made himself some money too, right?
That's true.
And I think we just got to be happy for those guys, right? When they go and they have a good year, they're gonna go and they're gonna have some organization pay them a lot of money, and it's great. It's great for them. I just don't think Baker's not somebody who I would be willing to go out and kind of sign. There are some quarterbacks though that I think we're going to see some movement this offseason with the quarterbacks and even some young ones. And I really, it's funny last night, right? We had the Ravens on and they go and they play so well. And then the revisionist history now on people who are like, oh no, we called them. It's like, did you really call the Ravens? Because it didn't seem like you were interested last year. And then now all of a sudden he's a superstar and everyone, I just feel like Justin's cut a lot from the same cloth of where I just wonder what's going to happen with him in the future. And if he does catch on somewhere else, I wonder how much revisionist history we'll have of like, oh, yeah, well, I always thought he was going to be great. And it's like, did you? So it'll be interesting.
Tim, great.